I will never forget the night the owls wouldn't stop crying in our village. That sound is a bad omen, and it all began when Prince Aamadu was executed for a crime so vile that even the elders could no longer protect him. Prince Aamadu was not like his father, the kind king who loved his people. No, Prince Aamadu was wicked and greedy, loved only power. When he was young, he'd pull wings off flies just to watch them struggle. As he grew, his cruelty and greed grew with him. Aamadu was the youngest of 3 brothers, but he craved power more than anyone else in the royal family. When his father, the king, grew old and sick, the village knew the time for choosing a new leader was near. Tradition dictated that the eldest son would take the throne, but Aamadu had other plans. One night, during the harvest festival, Aamadu poisoned his oldest brother's drink. It wasn't a quick death. The prince collapsed in the middle of the celebration, gasping for air, his skin turning a sickly shade of blue as he choked in front of everyone. People rushed to help him, but it was too late. By morning, he was dead. The village mourned, but no one suspected Aamadu, not yet. A week later, Aamadu's second brother mysteriously disappeared. His horse was found near the river, its saddle still on, but there was no sign of the prince. After days of searching, all the villagers found were bloodstains on the rocks by the water. That was when the whispers started. People began to talk about the greedy young prince, the one who wanted power so badly he would kill his own blood to get it. The elders decided to investigate, and it didn't take long for the truth to come out. A servant, who had been loyal to the second brother, confessed to seeing Aamadu sneak out of the palace the night his brother disappeared. Fearful for his life, the servant had stayed silent until then. With the evidence before them, the elders had no choice. Aamadu was taken to the village square and tied him up, hands behind his back for all to see. His crimes had brought shame and death upon the royal family and the village itself. Even his own mother and father the king refused to look at him as they prepared to carry out the execution. Aamadu spat curses at everyone, even at his own family and the elders, until the very end. Prince Aamadu was not supposed to be alive. I saw him die, with my own eyes, right in the middle of the village square. The sun was setting, and the whole village was there, as silent as they watched. They buried him deep in the ground. I remember seeing his body covered with dirt, his eyes still wide open. Everyone thought it was over. But it wasn't. A few weeks later, Aamadu's mother and father, the king, passed on mysteriously to be with their ancestors. A few days passed, then strange things started happening. The cry of the owls grew stronger each night. The elders believed it was a sign the forest was mourning. But they were wrong. First, animals went missing. Chickens, goats, dogs, just gone, without a trace. Then people began to hear whispers at night, soft and low, like someone calling their name from the dark. I was one of them. I heard Aamadu's voice. It was just past midnight, and the night was thick with heat and silence. I was lying on my mat, half asleep, when I heard it. Come outside. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, but my body wouldn't move. The voice came again, closer this time. Come outside. It was Aamadu's voice, but it was wrong, like it was being pulled from deep inside the earth. I knew it couldn't be him, he was dead. I had watched him die. But the voice kept calling me, and before I knew it, my feet were moving. Outside, the village was quiet, but the moon was full, casting long shadows across the ground. I stood there, waiting, then I saw him. Aamadu was standing at the edge of the village, right by the tree line. He looked just like he did before he died, except his skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes were dark, empty pits, and his mouth hung open in a silent scream. He was staring right at me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Then he pointed. His long, bony finger stretched out towards me, and I felt something cold crawl up my spine. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, my legs started to work again, and I ran. I ran until I couldn't feel my legs anymore, and when I looked back, Aamadu was gone. But the fear wasn't. The next day, I told the elders what I saw. They didn't believe me at first, but then others started seeing him too. He would appear at the edge of the village, always silent, always pointing. And every time someone saw him, they would disappear a few days later, no warning, no trace. Just gone. The elders tried everything. They called the medicine men, performed rituals, but nothing worked. Aamadu kept coming back, haunting us, taking more people with him each time. Now, there are only a few of us left. The village is empty, and every night, I hear his voice. Come outside. But I don't go anymore. I know what happens if I do. Now, I keep my windows shut tight at night. I don't listen to the whispers. I don't let myself even peek outside, no matter how strong the pull is. But it's not just me anymore. Every night, I hear the same voice calling out to the others who are left, one by one. It's always the same. Come outside. Some nights, I hear footsteps. I hear them walking out into the dark, just like I almost did. Once they leave, they're gone. You never see them again. You don't find bodies. No signs of struggle. Just nothing. Their hearts sit empty, their fires burn out, and their names are whispered only in fear. Last night, my best friend, Binta, was taken. She was the only one left in the village who still had hope. She would sit by the fire, praying to the ancestors for protection. She swore that if she didn't listen to him, Aamadu would leave her alone. But he didn't. The voice called to her, and I heard her footsteps as she walked out into the night. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. I stayed inside, lying on my mat, covering my ears, telling myself not to listen. But her voice haunted me all night, as if she was still there, calling for help. But I know she's gone now, just like the others. There's only me left now. The village is empty, dead like the air that surrounds it. I'm alone, waiting for the voice to come again. I know it will. I hear it even during the day now, faint and distant, but it's always there, calling me. The night is coming, and I feel the pull growing stronger. I don't know how long I can resist. I'm tired, too tired to fight anymore. If you're reading this, then you hear that voice, don't listen. Don't go outside. Because once you do, there's no coming back. The wicked prince always gets what he wants. The sun is setting again. I can feel the cool air creeping in, and the shadows are growing longer outside my heart. It's quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no crickets, nothing but the sound of my own breath. I've been thinking about what will happen when the voice comes tonight. What if it's not just Aamadu out there? What if all the others he's taken are with him, lost in the dark, wandering the forest, waiting for me to join them? I keep picturing Binta's face, the way she looked at me the last time I saw her, full of hope, as if she still believed we could stop this. But we couldn't. I've been trying to stay awake, to keep my mind sharp, but it's hard. Every night, the voice gets stronger, louder. Last night, I heard it right at my door, as if Aamadu was standing just outside, waiting for me to open it. I could feel him there, his presence heavy, pressing against the thin walls of my heart. Tonight, it feels different. Like something is about to happen. I don't know if I can keep resisting. I don't know if I even want to anymore. The loneliness is too much. The silence, the emptiness, maybe it would be easier to just let go. Maybe that's what everyone else did. Maybe they got tired of fighting it too. I hear it now. Come outside. It's louder this time, clearer. He's closer, I can feel it. My hands are shaking as I write this, but I need to keep going. I need to remind myself why I can't listen. But the voice, it's so strong now. It's pulling me towards the door. My feet want to move, but I'm trying to stay still. I'm gripping the edge of my mat, but it feels like something is pulling me from the inside. Come outside. I don't know how long I can hold on. The door is rattling, the air is cold, and I can hear footsteps outside. Not just one pair, many. They are circling my heart, brushing against the walls, whispering my name. I don't know what's real anymore. Is it Aamadu, or is it the others he's taken? Are they all here, waiting for me to join them? Come outside. I'm so tired. The whispers won't stop. The door won't stop shaking. I can't hold on any longer. If you find this, I hope it's not too late for you. I hope you can resist longer than I could. Because I'm about to open the door. I can't fight it anymore. I'm going outside. I opened the door. I don't remember doing it. One moment I was gripping the mat, trying to hold on, and the next, I was standing at the threshold of my heart. The air outside was colder than I expected. Colder than it should have been for our village. The moon was high, casting everything in a pale, ghostly light. And there they were. Aamadu stood at the edge of the village, just as he always did, his figure tall and still in the moonlight. His skin was even more ashen than before, and his eyes were darker than the night itself. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just pointed, as always, his bony finger stretching toward me. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, in the shadows, were the others. I could see their outlines, faint and flickering like shadows on water. Binta was there, her face pale and blank, her eyes empty like Aamadu's. They all looked the same, drained of life, nothing more than hollow shells. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just stood there, waiting. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that if I stepped outside, something would happen instantly, a force would grab me, pull me into the dark. But nothing did. It was just quiet. Too quiet. My feet moved without me thinking, pulling me closer to them, closer to Aamadu. The cold air beat at my skin, but I couldn't stop myself. The pull was too strong. It was like a thread was tied around my chest, dragging me toward him. As I got closer, I could see Aamadu more clearly. His eyes were even worse up close. They were like black holes, sucking in everything around them. But there was something else, something behind them, rage. Not the wild anger he showed in life, but a deep, endless fury, something beyond human. And that's when I realized he wasn't going to stop. Not with me, not with the village. He would keep pulling people into the darkness until there was no one left. And even then, it wouldn't be enough. His hunger would never end. I was just a few steps away from him now. The others were closing in around me, their silent faces watching. I could feel the cold pressing in, my breath growing shorter, in my body growing weaker. Then, Aamadu's mouth moved. He didn't say anything, but I saw his lips part, his teeth sharp and yellow against the blackness of his mouth. He raised his hand higher, and I felt the pull grow stronger, like it was trying to rip me apart. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was something else, but I found the strength to stop moving. I dug my heels into the dirt and forced myself to turn away, to look anywhere but at Aamadu. I didn't run, I couldn't, but I took a step back. Then another. And with each step, the pull got weaker. I kept going, backing away, until I was inside my hut again. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, the whispers grew louder, angry now. The door rattled violently, and I thought it might burst open. But I didn't open it again. I pressed my back against it and held on with everything I had. Eventually, the whispers stopped. The door went still. The air grew warm again. When I finally found the courage to look outside, Aamadu was gone, and so were the others. I don't know what happened, or why they left. Maybe they'll come back. Maybe they are waiting for me to make a mistake. But for now, I'm still here, and the village is quiet once more. I don't think I'll ever be safe. Not really. But tonight, at least, I'm alive. And that's enough. The next morning, I stepped outside, half expecting to see the shadows lingering at the edge of the village. But there was nothing. The sun was rising, painting everything in warm, golden light. It was almost like things were normal again, like the nights of terror had been some kind of bad dream. But I knew better. The village was still empty, except for me. The huts that once bustled with life now stood silent, their doors open, their fires cold. The animals were gone, the fields untended. There was no sound except for the wind rustling through the trees. I walked through the village, looking for signs that someone else might have survived. I checked the huts one by one, but they were all the same, empty. As if everyone had just vanished into thin air. I stopped at Binta's hut. Her door was still ajar from the night she left. I pushed it open, half hoping she would be there, sitting by her fire, smiling that hopeful smile of hers. But inside, there was nothing but an empty mat and cold ashes. A wave of loneliness washed over me. It was like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I couldn't stand it. I ran back to my own hut, shut the door, and curled up on my mat, trying to hold on to the warmth of the sun. But even in daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there. That Aamadu was still watching, waiting for nightfall. Waiting for me to sleep up. I tried to stay busy during the day, tending to the fields, gathering firewood, anything to keep my mind occupied. But every time I passed the tree line, I felt like something was watching me from the shadows. The forest seemed darker, denser than before, and the air felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every rustle of the wind made me sit up in fear. I kept thinking I would hear the whispers again, the voice calling me outside. But the night passed in silence, and when the sun rose again, I was still alone. Days went by like that. I kept myself busy during the day, but the nights were the worst. Even when the whispers didn't come, the fear stayed with me. I was always waiting for it to start again, for Aamadu to return. Then, one morning, something changed. As I was gathering water from the river, I heard a noise in the distance, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. It was the sound of voices. Human voices. I rushed back to the village, my heart pounding with hope. When I reached the edge of the village, I saw them. A small group of people, walking toward me. They were strangers, not from our village, but I didn't care. They were alive. They looked at me with wide eyes, confused and worried. One of them, an older man with a walking stick, stepped forward and asked me what had happened here. Why the village was empty. I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell people about a prince who refuses to stay dead, about whispers in the night that pull you into the dark? I just shook my head and told them it wasn't safe here. That they needed to leave. The man looked around, then back at me. He asked if I was the only one left. When I nodded, his face grew grim. He didn't say anything for a while, just stared at the huts, as if trying to make sense of it all. Finally, he spoke. He said that they were travelers, moving from village to village, looking for somewhere to settle. They had heard stories of strange things happening in the region, of entire villages disappearing without a trace. But they hadn't believed it. Not until now. I wanted to tell them to keep moving, to go far away from here, but the man just smiled sadly and said they didn't have anywhere else to go. They would stay at least for a little while to see if the land could be farmed again. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I listened for the whispers, for any sign that Aamadu was coming back. But the night passed quietly, and when the sun rose, the strangers were still there. They began to rebuild the village, tending to the fields, repairing the huts. They were kind to me, offering food and helping with the work. But I couldn't bring myself to feel safe. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the darkness to return. Weeks went by, and slowly, the village began to feel alive again. More travelers came, more huts were built, and for the first time in a long time, there were voices in the air again. Laughter even. But the fear never left me. I never let myself get too close to the others. I stayed on the edge, always watching, always waiting. Because I knew that Aamadu was still out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to come back. One night, as I lay on my mat, I heard something, a faint whisper. It wasn't calling my name this time. It was calling someone else's. I froze, holding my breath, listening. The whisper grew louder, closer. And then I heard footsteps. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, echoing through the silent night. My heart raced as I lay still, barely daring to breathe. I knew those footsteps. I'd heard them before, heavy, with a dragging sound, like someone walking with a limp. The kind of sound Aamadu made when he first appeared after his death. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know who had answered the call this time. But I couldn't help myself. I crawled to the edge of my mat, carefully pulling back the cloth that covered the window. Outside, under the moonlight, I saw one of the new villagers. A young woman, her name was Salima. She was standing in the middle of the path, her body stiff, her face pale. She wasn't moving, just standing there like a statue. And in front of her, barely visible in the dark, was Aamadu. He looked the same as he did the last time I saw him, grey-skinned, hollow-eyed, and twisted with a rage that seemed endless. His hand was outstretched, pointing directly at Salima, just like he had pointed at me that night. His lips were moving, but no sound came out, just the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. I wanted to scream, to run out and grab Salima, to shake her free of whatever hold Aamadu had on her. But I couldn't move. Fear had rooted me in place, just like it had so many times before. All I could do was watch. Salima's feet shifted, just slightly, like she was about to take a step forward. My heart pounded harder. If she moved any closer, if she crossed that line, she would be gone. I knew it. I'd seen it happen before. But then, something happened that I didn't expect. Salima stopped. She turned her head just a little, and her eyes seemed to clear for a moment. She looked around, as if waking from a dream, and then she did something I hadn't seen anyone do before. She stepped back. Aamadu's figure flickered like a shadow in a gust of wind. His hand twitched, and for the first time, I saw a hint of uncertainty in his hollow eyes. Salima took another step back, and then another, until she was almost out of the moonlight. Aamadu's form grew more unstable, his shape blurring and fading at the edges. He didn't move toward her. He didn't chase her. He just stood there, his finger still pointing, but weaker now, like he was losing whatever power he had over her. Salima turned and ran, and as soon as she crossed the threshold of her heart, Aamadu vanished. The night was still again, as if nothing had happened. I stayed by the window for hours, waiting to see if he would come back, if the whispers would start again. But they didn't. The night remained quiet, and eventually the exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, Salima came to me. She looked shaken, but alive, and there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She told me she had heard the voice, just like I had, but something inside her told her to resist. She said it felt like a battle in her mind, like something was trying to drag her into the dark, but she fought back. I listened in silence, my heart heavy with both fear and hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to break Aamadu's hold on the village. Maybe Salima had found something that the rest of us hadn't. A way to resist the pull, to fight back against the darkness. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Aamadu wasn't gone. Not yet. That night, I stayed awake, waiting for the whispers. Waiting for the sound of footsteps. But they didn't come. The village slept peacefully, and for the first time in weeks, so did I. But in my dreams, I saw him. Aamadu is standing at the edge of the village, his eyes burning with a deeper rage than before. He wasn't done. Not yet. He would come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but he would return. And when he did, we would have to be ready. Because this time, he wouldn't just take one of us. He would come for all of us. The days after Salima's escape from Aamadu's pool were unsettlingly quiet. Too quiet. It felt like the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. More people arrived, travelers and wanderers like the first group, and the village seemed to come back to life bit by bit. But the fear lingered, like a shadow over everything. Salima and I grew closer during that time. She had a strength I hadn't seen in anyone since the whisper started. She wasn't afraid to talk about what had happened that night, even though it scared the others. Most of them didn't want to hear it. They were trying to forget it, to move on. But Salima refused to let them. She said that if we ignored the danger, we would only make it stronger. Some nights, she would come to my hut, and we would sit together by the fire, talking in hushed voices about Aamadu and what we could do to stop him. She believed that there was a way to break his curse for good, that he wasn't invincible. But I wasn't so sure. Aamadu was like a force of nature, something beyond our control. One evening, Salima brought an idea to me. She had been talking to the elders from another village they had passed through before arriving here. They had told her stories of spirits bound to the earth, of rituals that could sever their ties to this world. She believed that Aamadu was one of those spirits, bound by anger, by revenge. And if we could find what was keeping him here, we might be able to send him back for good. The thought of confronting Aamadu terrified me, but Salima's determination gave me hope. If anyone could find a way to stop him, it was her. So, one night, we gathered a small group, Salima, me, and two others who had lost loved ones to Aamadu. We sat around the fire, planning. Salima explained what she had learned from the elders, that we needed to find Aamadu's body and perform a ritual to sever his connection to this world. It was the only way to end his reign of terror. But there was a problem. No one knew where Aamadu's body was buried. After his execution, the elders of our village had hidden his grave, fearing that his spirit would linger. They had told no one, not even their families, where they had buried him. And now, those elders were gone, taken by Aamadu in the early days of his haunting. It seemed like an impossible task. How were we supposed to find a grave that had been hidden so well? But Salima didn't give up. She said that we needed to listen to the whispers. That Aamadu would show us the way, even if he didn't mean to. So, we waited. That night, as I lay in my hut, I heard them again. The whispers. But this time, they were different. They weren't calling me outside. They were guiding me. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was softer, less insistent, almost like a song. I knew I had to follow them. I left my hut quietly, slipping into the night. The others were already waiting for me at the edge of the village, their faces pale in the moonlight. We didn't speak, just nodded to each other and started walking. The whispers led us deep into the forest, farther than I had ever gone before. The trees grew thicker, the air colder. It felt like the forest was alive, watching us, judging us. But the whispers kept pulling us forward, and we followed without question. Finally, we reached a clearing. In the center stood an old, twisted tree, its roots gnarled and half buried in the earth. The air around it felt heavy, like the weight of the dead was pressing down on us. This was it. We had found Aamadu's grave. Salima stepped forward, clutching a bundle of herbs and a small knife, the tools for the ritual. She knelt by the tree, her hands shaking as she began to chant softly in a language I didn't understand. The rest of us formed a circle around her, our eyes fixed on the tree, waiting for something to happen. At first, nothing did. The forest remained still, the whisper silent. Salima kept on chanting. But then, the ground beneath the tree began to shift. Slowly, the roots parted, revealing a dark, gaping hole. And from that hole, a figure began to rise. It was Aamadu. But he wasn't the same as before. His body was more solid now, more real. His eyes burned with an unnatural fire, and his mouth twisted into a snarl. He wasn't just a shadow anymore, he was something worse. Something angry. Something vengeful. Salima didn't stop chanting, even as Aamadu rose higher, his form growing more monstrous with each passing second. She held her ground, her voice grew louder and steady, though I could see the fear in her eyes. The rest of us were frozen, too terrified to move or to breathe. Fear gripped us. The wind around us blew furiously. Aamadu's gaze locked onto Salima, and he lunged at her, faster than I could have imagined. But before he could reach her, she slashed the knife across her palm and let her blood drip onto the roots of the tree. The air around us seemed to shudder, and Aamadu let out a howl that echoed through the forest, shaking the trees. For a moment, I thought the ritual had failed, that he would destroy us all. But then, his body began to disintegrate, crumbling into dust. The wind picked up, swirling the ashes around us, and then, just like that, he was gone. The air grew still again, and the weight lifted from my chest. It was over. Salima collapsed to the ground, exhausted, and we rushed to her side. She was pale, but alive. We helped her to her feet, and together, we made our way back to the village. When we returned, the village felt different. Lighter. The air didn't feel as heavy, and the shadows didn't seem as dark. Aamadu was gone, truly gone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. But even now, there are nights when I wake up and think I hear whispers in the distance. I remind myself that Aamadu is gone, that the curse has been broken. But deep down, I know that some things never truly go away. They just lie dormant, waiting. And I'll be ready. If he ever comes back.